Hey book lovers, my name is Em, and I want to talk about books. And cats. Hey book lovers, so I've got some exciting news. The podcast has joined a network. It's called That's Not Canon, and it has some really great shows. A lot of them are Australian, which is pretty cool. The network is actually based out of Australia. They've got some really good shows, and I am so excited to be a part of it. They've also got some other book-based podcasts that I'm really excited about. I saw one in particular that I'm very interested in, called Mordor, She Wrote, which is a fantastic title. And it's where a mega Lord of the Rings fan and a person who has never read The Lord of the Rings go through the books chapter by chapter. So Mordor, She Wrote, it sounds awesome. It probably won't look a lot different, but if there are changes, that's why. So today's episode features one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite actors. Not the same person. I am a ridiculous David Tennant fan ever since Doctor Who. He's just an amazing actor. He's incredibly versatile, especially with accents, especially knowing that he has a pretty awesome Scottish brogue normally. But last night I watched Bad Samaritan, and that movie is amazing. Like, I thought it was going to be good, but it was even better than I expected. Which has nothing to do with the books, but David Tennant's my favorite. Anyway, he has a podcast, and it's called David Tennant Does a Podcast With, and each episode he interviews a different famous person. So recently I listened to the episode where he talked to Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is in my top 2 favorite authors. He is only second to Stephen King, and that's only because I have not read all of his work, whereas I've read almost everything Stephen King has written. His style is definitely more my type of thing, my type of stuff that I write. I love fantasy and magical realism, anything that's strange and super creative. And I would say that strange and super creative kind of sums up all of Neil Gaiman's work. The first thing I ever read by him was American Gods, and it was so good. It was another gift, a book gift, from a friend, along with Good Omens, which was the second book of his that I read. Both of these have been turned into TV shows. I haven't seen American Gods. It looks incredible, and I've heard really good things, but I still am hesitant. That book created such a picture in my mind, and it was such an experience that I still remember. I'm not sure that I want to replace my memory with whatever this TV version is, but I'll most likely give in eventually because it does look good. I did give in on Good Omens, though. I can't pass up a David Tennant and Neil Gaiman combo. So this week, the book I want to talk about is Good Omens, The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, Witch, by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. So there may be some spoilers to this book, but honestly, it's been out since 1990, so just go read it already. Plus, you can't ever spoil Neil Gaiman. His imagery is amazing. So in the podcast interview, Gaiman called Good Omens an apprenticeship with a master craftsman. He knew that getting to work with Terry Pratchett was an opportunity that he could not pass up, even though at the time he was writing his Sandman comic. I do love that he started in comics. I think that's what kind of sets him apart from other writers. His style is so recognizably his own, and just the way he describes things, you know that he has like a crystal clear picture of what it looks like in his mind. So, Good Omens is a comedy about the birth of the son of Satan and the coming of the apocalypse. Fun stuff. I love the introductions to all the characters, especially the main demon and angel, Crowley and Aziraphal. And my other favorite is how he introduces the four horsemen of the apocalypse. There is a lot of similarities between the four horsemen in particular and some of the gods in American Gods. And it might be because I read those two books kind of back to back, and so they're kind of intermingled in my brain. But it's just that Neil Gaiman style. It's so good. In the podcast with David Tennant, Gaiman said that he was very interested in religions, which again is obvious in both Good Omens and American Gods. I really like the way he handles history and hypocrisies and beliefs from all different religions, and kind of talks about the questionable balance of good and evil, and somehow makes it funny and almost slapstick in places. The fact that he can write slapstick is pretty impressive, honestly. So, in the beginning of the book, after meeting the main characters, we witness a grave mistake involving the placement and training of the son of Satan. They're supposed to swap the son of Satan with a politician's baby, but there's a mix-up and he ends up with a different family, but no one knows. But still, the demon child is out there, and the beginning of the end is set into motion. So Crowley and Aziraphal have both grown to love the human race and many of the things that the human race created. Aziraphal loves books and sushi. Honestly, I would save the human race to save those things. And Crowley has his Bentley. So after centuries of being on Earth at the same time, they develop a rapport and a friendship, and they both decide that they're going to try to prevent the end of everything, which involves them turning against their orders, but also somewhat fulfilling the job of thwarting others. So they're kind of fulfilling their orders and kind of not fulfilling their orders at the same time. This book is full of ridiculous misunderstandings and costly mistakes. While the world is just unknowingly circling toward the end. It's really fantastic, and it's such a good read. I think it's best summed up by a quote from the San Francisco Chronicle, which is on the back cover of the copy I have. And the quote is, "It reads like the Book of Revelation, rewritten by Monty Python." And if that doesn't tempt you to read this book, then I don't know what will. So now let's talk about the TV version. Well, Amazon Prime version. It's not really on TV. I don't know. So I was apprehensive about watching this. I just tend to find that things that are made from books just aren't as good. They just don't create the same feel for me. But this one did a pretty good job. I was happily surprised. So this is 6 episodes. They're each about an hour long, which honestly is a really nice way to explore all the depth in this book. There's so many different storylines and characters that I can't imagine trying to fit this into like your standard like 2-hour blockbuster movie or whatever. Even 3 hours I think would be a stretch because there's so many different storylines. So after saying how apprehensive I was, I waited way too long to watch this show. I didn't think it could do it justice, but it did it so well. It was directed by Douglas MacKinnon, who also did Sherlock and Line of Duty. I love Sherlock so much. And after I looked it up, I could definitely see the similarities in some of the choices between Sherlock and Good Omens. The costumes are fabulous. I used to be a costumer for theatrical productions, so I tend to notice costuming choices, little details. A lot of these would be hard to miss, honestly. It's pretty spectacular. But if you look closely, there's a lot of tiny specific detail to each character. I just loved it. So good. So good. There was also a bunch of really great actors in this. I was there for David Tennant and Michael Sheen. They are such a funny pairing. And they did a lot of things like promoting the show when it first came out. And also once we went into lockdown, they did some stuff together and they're so funny. So I knew that with those two kind of holding it together that it would be worth watching. But there's also Frances McDormand as God / the narrator. And I love her and her voice. So that's excellent casting. John Hamm was in it. He's always good. Plus he had purple contacts, which is so cool. I always wanted purple contacts when I was a teenager, like purple or black. I'd still do purple. I don't think I'd do black now. It also has Nick Offerman, who is awesome, and he's so, like, subtly funny in this show. Like, he is a very funny man. But it was so subtle, but so, so funny. I didn't know who Adria Arona was, but she was so fantastic as the witch. Perfect casting. Love her. I also knew that I recognized the actor playing Famine, who was so good. But I couldn't really place him, and then when I looked it up, he was in The Originals, which is one of the best vampire shows I've seen. The actor's name is Yusuf Gatewood. So good. So good. Okay. So if I'm going to be 100% honest, I did not love all the parts of this show. The book was a little more tolerable, but I think that's because I'm a fast reader. And, you know, if I get too bored, I kind of skim a little bit. I did find that there were certain sections that I did not read as thoroughly as other sections. And I felt the same way about the show. I might have skipped through some of it. That good old 10-second advance. Love it. I just didn't really love the Witchfinder army part. I didn't love it in the book. The acting was good. It just isn't very engaging or entertaining. I do understand why it has to be in there and the part it serves in the end. Just not my favorite part. Meanwhile, I love the witch part. It was so well done, and I love both Agnes Nutter and her descendant. Obviously, I'm on the witch's side for this part. I like that they came together in the end and had to work together. There's lots of opposing characters working together in this one, like the Witchfinder General and his neighbor, who he calls the Whore of Babylon. That part was a little funny. I like her. She's funny. And also, my biggest question while watching this was, why do I dislike Adam so much? I don't know if it was the actor or just the way it was written. I don't know. He's the son of Satan, but then he lands in a normal home and has, like, normal human influences. And he has a good crew of friends. The friends are great. Pepper's my favorite. She's, like, the feisty girl. And then there's Wensleydale and Mark. Adam is honestly, like, the most boring and unextraordinary of all of them, except for that when he's sleeping, he can create whatever he's dreaming of. I have to say I did skip through the kids' parts a bit, not Pepper's. She was great. But I did love the group of friends all together, and I always love the theme of, like, true friendship. And they use that to help bring him back from the dark side. And then they face the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse together and defeat them, which I love strong kid characters. Kids really give me hope, like fictional and even more so real ones. It's a different world from my childhood now, and kids are so much smarter and kinder, and it just makes me hopeful. I directed plays with middle and high school students for 13 years, and kids are inspiring. Like, they're gonna fix all of our mistakes. Anyway, okay, I'm back to Pro Kid. Adam really does need to be troubled and wishy-washy. That's his character. I never like those characters. They usually tend to be the main character, like the protagonist. I've always been, like, more of a fan of, like, the secondary funny character. But anyway, he needs to be there. He's the center of everything. So, my personal favorite part in both the book and the show, which I mentioned before, is the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They're even more badass in the show. Each one of them is introduced by receiving a special delivery. And honestly, the delivery man is by far the funniest character in the show. He is fantastic. So first we meet War. She's pretty, a redhead, and causes havoc wherever she goes. Then we meet Famine, who was my favorite, as I mentioned before, currently marketing a line of foodless food called Chow. Then there's Pollution, who replaced Pestilence, who is found sitting by a river full of trash, and you guessed it, pollution. And then finally there is Death, inevitable and indestructible. They also ride badass motorcycles. So cool. So finally, I want to briefly talk about the angel Aziraphal and the demon Crowley. I think my favorite episode might have been the 3rd one. It begins with short scenes from various times throughout the history of man, and it also shows the growth of the friendship between an angel and a demon. They both get a bit of human in them. They're both a little too free-thinking to adhere entirely to the great plan. And they respect the human race after watching them grow from the beginning, and in the end, they have to turn against both sides and fight together. It's epic and funny and really well done. The two of them have so much chemistry. So good. I really think that episodic shows have been a wonderful thing for the adaptation of books. They just have so much more time, and I'm definitely more hopeful to watch things that are made from books in the future. Of course, there are some adaptations that are just terrible. And if you're interested in seeing my thoughts on some of them, stay tuned for my Patreon, which is coming soon, because that's one of the bonus things you can get. I'm going to torture myself by watching the movies that will ruin some of my favorite books. It's all for you, book lovers. Anyway, Patreon coming soon. And now let's take a quick break. Hey, book lovers. Now, as you might have guessed, I love everything to do with words. And I've been learning German for almost a year now. Prismatext has been such a help. I can read some of the best classics with German words mixed in. I really can't think of a better way to learn German. Currently, Prismatext books are available in English as a first language. And some of the languages you can learn include Spanish, French, Italian, German, and Portuguese. Right now, I have gone through all of my Prismatext books, and I need to make another order, which I have to say I'm pretty excited about. Follow the link in the show notes to help support the podcast. I would really, really appreciate it. And use code BOOKSANDCATS for 30% off your order. That's all caps, books, the letter N, cats, for 30% off. Start learning today while enjoying your favorite classics with Prismatext. Welcome back, book lovers. So this episode, we're going to do 2 books because I've been a reading machine lately. I wanted to continue with the theme of creativity because Neil Gaiman is about as creative as a person can be. And I hope to be even a percentage as good as him. So I want to talk about a nonfiction book now. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. I've been watching a lot of podcasts lately, especially by comedians, and it led me to an episode of Where My Mom's At, which is a really good podcast with Christina Pazitsky. She is so funny and relatable. And this episode that I was listening to involved Leanne Kreischer, who is the wife of another comedian, Bert Kreischer. And they started talking about this book that had to do with creativity and art and overcoming your blocks, and they were just raving about it. So I wrote it down, Amazoned it, and now I'm going to talk about it. First of all, this is the second self-help type book that I've read that has a title that plays on the art of war. Why is that? If anybody has any ideas, send me a message. I would love to hear your thoughts. Books.cats.pod on Instagram and Facebook, or books.cats.pod@gmail. Anyway, this one is called The War of Art, and I really enjoyed it. So this book is all about artists. It focuses mainly on writers, but it really does pertain to really anyone with a creative goal of any kind. So it talks about artists and what Pressfield calls resistance. And it's broken into 3 sections. Section 1 is all about defining resistance. It covers quite a few things. Basically, anything keeping you from creating is resistance. As he says in the book, it's not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write. What keeps us from sitting down is resistance. So you can see how that could add up to a lot of things really quickly. He starts off with a list, in no particular order, of activities that will most commonly elicit resistance. Let me tell you what they are. The pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. The launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise, for profit or otherwise. Any diet or health regime. Any program of spiritual advancement. Any activities whose aim is tighter abdominals. Any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction. Education of every kind. Any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern of thought or conduct in ourselves. The undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others. Any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky patch in a relationship. And finally, the taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. So basically, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term goals, health, growth, integrity, these are all going to elicit resistance. So this is how Pressfield defined resistance. Resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a work in potential. It's a repelling force. It's negative. Its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. What follows in the first section is a deeper dive into just how resistance works. I have to say, I identified with a lot of it, and it also made me pretty happy because it made me realize that somewhere along the way, I learned to combat resistance and I turned pro, as Stephen Pressfield would say. Which brings me to section 2, combating resistance, turning pro. So this section is all about how you fight against resistance. I've read several books on being a writer, and they tend to always use terms like fight and battle, and I really don't disagree. Sometimes it really feels that way. So Pressfield talks about the difference between professionals and amateurs. He talks about how when you take that moment and turn to pro, everything changes. And when he says professional, he's not talking about doctors or lawyers or that kind of professional. He's talking about professional as an ideal. Professional in contrast to amateur. And as he said, the amateur plays for fun, the professional plays for keeps. To the amateur, the game is his avocation. To the pro, it's his vocation. The amateur plays part-time, and the professional full-time. You get the idea. The word amateur comes from the Latin root meaning to love. The conventional interpretation is that the amateur pursues his calling out of love, while the pro does it for money. Not the way I see it. In my view, the amateur does not love the game enough. If he did, he would not pursue it as a sideline, distinct from his real vocation. The professional loves it so much he dedicates his life to it. He commits full time. And that's what I mean when I say turning pro. Resistance hates it when we turn pro. I love that. I know it's kind of long, but I just had to share that part with you. This part really did make me happy because I remember the moment, not the exact moment, but I remember when I made the decision to make a serious effort with my writing, and I started forcing myself to write every day. I even tracked it, the way I tracked like exercise and everything else, and it was difficult. Resistance was definitely there, and it still is. I mean, some days it's still difficult. You know, it's never ending, but now writing has become a habit, and I've made it part of my everyday. Some days go better than others still, but at least I try. I've definitely had a few days where I just knew it wasn't going to happen and gave up. So the second section is all about different tactics to use to fight resistance. And while I did find that I was doing some of them, there are still a lot that I need to consider adding into my repertoire. One more quote from section 2, just because I love it. There is no mystery to turning pro. It's a decision brought about by an act of will. We make up our mind to view ourselves as pros, and we do it. Simple as that. And I love that because it really is as simple as that. I think our anxiety likes to, paint a really dark picture and make things seem impossible. And when you think about it, all you have to do is decide to do it and then start. The starting's the hard part. So then the third section of the book is called Beyond Resistance. It deals with what comes after you've beaten resistance, and it discusses the relationship between the artist and the muse. It's so accurate, and it's so beautifully written. It's really wonderful, and I get it. Like, as a writer, it spoke to me, and I think anybody with a creative endeavor knows about the muse. This book is really a gem. Honestly, you can apply it to anything you dream of doing. Even with the rave reviews, I was not sure I was going to like this. I've read a lot of self-help books that claim to be a kick in the ass, and then they kind of fall flat, or parts of it falls flat. This one actually is wonderful. Whole thing, beginning to end. I love it. Highly recommend it. Normally, I don't reread self-help books, but I'm definitely going to give this one another read, if not several more. When I was reading it the first time, I was kind of like, oh, I wish I had a highlighter so I could highlight certain parts. So I think this one's going to be sticking around on my desk somewhere, for sure. So now let's talk about my cats. So we have been kind of upgrading our house during quarantine. And our newest addition is a daybed, which, if you don't know what a daybed is, it kind of looks like a couch, but it fits a twin-size mattress and functions as a bed. It basically started out as an option for me on the nights when my husband is snoring too much, because the couch was pretty broken in and it was starting to wreck my back. So I ordered this nice memory foam mattress, and it showed up a few days before the bed frame, and then it took us a couple days to build the bed frame. So the animals had a very nice bed on the floor for a week, and they were in heaven. Zeus, our oldest, absolutely loves it. The first day it was out, I don't think he left it more than 3 times the entire day. He just kind of melted into it, and he had just the most contented expression on his face. It made me really happy. My old boy deserves the best. I'm glad he gets a memory foam bed. It also meant that Edward got his favorite things, a bunch of brand new boxes. He laid on top of them until we built the frame, and then once they were open, he got to play in them, and he was just so funny. I've never had a cat that loved cardboard as much as that cat does. It's so cute. So I want to end this episode with a quote of the week from Neil Gaiman, because, as I said, the man is brilliant. He has a ton of wonderful quotes, but I did find an article called 13 Neil Gaiman Quotes to Help Tackle Your Day, because honestly, who doesn't need some daily inspiration? There's a link to it in the show notes. I did limit myself to only 3 quotes. I love a good quote, but there will definitely be more Gaiman quotes in the future, I'm sure. Okay, I want to start with my all-time favorite quote by him, and the basis for how I view my own writing. It's from his book Coraline. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Another one that I've always loved that I didn't know was Neil Gaiman at first, it's from The Sandman, Volume 6. Sometimes you wake up, sometimes the fall kills you, and sometimes when you fall, you fly. And this last one is a little long, but so good. It's from Make Good Art. The one thing you have that nobody else has is you. Your voice, your mind, your story, your vision. So write and draw and build and play and dance and live as only you can. The moment that you feel that just possibly you are walking down the street naked, that's the moment you may be starting to get it right. I love that too. I love that he is so focused on uniqueness and creativity. So that is it for this kind of long episode of M's Books and Cats podcast. Make sure to check out the That's Not Canon website for all the other podcasts that I am now joining. Also, I have a new merch design. It's currently only on sweatshirts and kids' shirts. It's called Cosmic Cat Dreams, and it's so cute. And there's going to be more stuff to come soon. And again, remember, if you stick around after the music, you can hear Chapter 12 of my weekly writing project, Heart of the Storm. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep reading. Thanks for sticking around, book lovers. And now, Chapter 12 of Heart of the Storm. Mina was first aware of a desperate urge to urinate. She tried to open her eyes, but they seemed to be glued shut. Her arms were held tight to her sides with some kind of sticky, itchy gauze. Her whole body was encased in it, and she itched from head to toe. The feeling was immediately infuriating. Her nose was cold, and fresh, cool air entered her nostrils. Her mouth was stuffed with more of the sticky fiber. It made little cuts on her tongue when she tried to speak. She could only manage a soft, muffled sound. She tried to loosen her bindings. At first they allowed a small amount of movement, but they tightened the more she struggled. From outside her sticky, itchy prison, Mina heard a muffled sound. It was unmistakable. A sharp, piercing giggle, and Mina's skin was instantly bathed in cold, clammy sweat. The giggling grew closer, and a new sound joined the terrifying song. Scratching. It was faint at first, gentle, almost like a caress. Then the scratching grew louder and more aggressive. Mina heard the sound of fibers tearing, and soon the air in front of her face grew a little cooler, a little fresher. She tried to pull back when the long, sharp, blood-red nail ripped through her prison, but there was nowhere to go. The momentum of her sudden movement shifted her, and the nail pierced the flesh on the tip of her nose. Tears sprung up in Mina's eyes, and she felt the blood gather at the end of her nose and form a single droplet. It stained the sticky fibers in front of her face for a moment, and then the nails jabbed through the slit they had created and tore the fibers apart. Mina coughed in the cold, fresh air. Her lungs felt cottony and full. The air tried to fight through the wet wool there, and her body was racked with painful coughing. She could not stop. Her abs ached with the effort, but she could do nothing to fight it. Her mouth filled with the taste of blood, and the thing that finally dislodged and came up was black and horrifying. Mina couldn't look at it directly. The girls were standing before her and grinning. They dove for the slimy mass and fought like wild animals, clawing and screeching and pulling each other's hair. The blonde one was victorious, and she clutched her prize, held it aloft, and in one disgusting move, slurped it down and licked her lips. "Ha-ha!" she cried. She jumped to her feet, and an aura of golden fire surrounded her for a moment. The other two looked annoyed and rolled their eyes. They straightened their clothes and fixed their hair, but the black sludge clung to them and seemed to be eating away at their skin. The blonde one wrinkled her nose in disgust. "You two get cleaned up. You're a mess," she snapped. She licked a small smudge off the back of her hand and grinned at them. Her teeth were long and needle-sharp. The other two slunk away, wiping at their faces with their expensive clothes. The blonde one watched them go. She waited until they could be heard clambering up the metal stairs, their voices fading away as they grumbled discontentedly. Finally, the girl addressed Mina. "Time to make good on your oath, pretty one. The real queen has returned." Mina swallowed the lump forming in her throat. Then she thought of the foul thing that had emerged, and she felt faint. The blonde girl laughed. "No worries, old one. You only had one, and it's long gone." She smiled her horrid smile. "Thanks for that, by the way. It's been centuries since I had a fresh one. It's so much more nourishing when it's fresh." Mina wrinkled her nose. Her insides were churning with nausea. The blonde girl rolled her eyes. "Whatever you think you're feeling is just a leftover shadow. There's nothing left of you. Look." She tore away the rest of the cocoon that held Mina, and the older woman dropped to her knees, or what was left of them. She was no more than bone and tight, stretched flesh, the consistency of leather. She held up her skeletal fingers, and it seemed she could see right through them. Mina wanted to cry, but the blonde girl was right. There was nothing left of her. The girl, for just a moment, looked sympathetic. "It sucks, I know," she said. "You made your choice. You took the oath. I did as well. Long before your crew were even in existence." She laughed at Mina's surprised expression. "I know, I look good, right?" She tossed her long golden locks. "There is nothing better for the skin than the souls of oath-breakers. Yours will keep me going for years." "Is that what that was?" Mina asked. She had finally found her voice, but it was painful to talk. "Close enough," said the blonde girl. She was bored with Mina already. "We have some in storage. They're not as strong, but you won't need much to get started. I'll get you some decent clothes, too. The nice thing about being a size 0 is you can wear all the latest fashions." Mina took in the girl's perfect hair and makeup. Her clothes were straight off a runway. She should have been beautiful, and she was, on the surface. That was enough to fool most people. Normal people. But Mina was now one of them, and she could see the horrors beneath the facade. "You have souls in storage?" The girl nodded and examined her blood-red nails. "Tons. Don't worry. It will take a little while, but I bet we can get some of that nasty age off you. You'll be as smooth as a chunky baby. Not a newborn. They're gross," she added with a flourish of her nails. How do you... Mina searched for the right words. How do you acquire the souls? The blonde girl waved an impatient hand. We've got a guy across the river. You ask too many questions. Remember, we've got the rest of eternity together. Now let's go check out the closet. We call it a closet, but it's really an old farmhouse. We have collected a lot of clothes over the years, and I can't stand to part with any of them. She started walking away, and Mina tried to keep up. Her legs didn't hurt exactly. It felt more like they were a shadow, a memory of what her legs had once been. The girl was getting too far ahead. Mina focused intently on moving forward, and she suddenly shot past the girl and stopped just short of slamming into a wall. The blonde girl appeared at her side, laughing. Oh man, that was great, she said, slapping her bony knee. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it pretty quick. She guided Mina away from the wall and through the doorway. Trust me, you made the right choice, and now you must embrace your destiny. You are a dark-hearted one. She looped her arm through Mina's and laughed. We're going to have so much fun. As they skipped down the hallway, the voices of the other girls echoed in the cavernous rooms. There were other voices, too, lower and full of pain. Mina felt a heaviness in her limbs. The blonde girl tugged impatiently at her arm. Come on, ignore them. Listen to the girls. Hear only their voices. The other ones don't matter. The other voices aren't there. Mina nodded numbly. The voices had faded, and when she concentrated on the girls' excitable chatter, she was able to move once more. As they stepped out into the cold, Mina paused to take in a deep breath of pine-scented air. The river smelled terribly, but the wind tended to always blow the stench away from the valley. The door slammed behind them with a heavy clang, and Mina felt the weight lifted from her bones. Logically, she knew she had no form any longer, but she could still feel everything, just a little. That'll pass, the blonde girl said. Pretty soon you won't feel a thing. Mina stared out at the forest surrounding the warehouse. The narrow, rutted road that led from their prison to reality still bore the shattered remains of her long black car and the decomposing remains of her brave bodyguards. They'd been true after all. They had not sworn any oath. They had passed on. She hoped they had found peace. The girl wrinkled her nose again and removed the sunglasses from her head and settled them on her gaunt face. They covered half of any expression she may have. More peace than you, that's for sure, she giggled. Come on. Mina waited just a moment longer. Do you really have a guy on the other side of the river? Are you eating non-magical souls? The girl let out a frustrated groan up to the sky. You are so frustrating, you know that? Yes, we eat non-magical beings. There wasn't enough to go around otherwise, especially once your crew learned the art of eternal youth. Do you have any idea how many souls that requires? It was the only way. It was genius, really. Was it your idea? Mina wondered if she had misjudged this foul creature's intelligence. Just for a moment, though. No way, the girl exclaimed. Only one of us is smart enough to figure out something so complicated. The girl lowered her sunglasses. Her cold stare burned through Mina. Only the Queen could make it happen. You know that. She replaced her glasses and walked away. Mina followed slowly, trying to digest this new information. The Queen had broken the pact. An ancient agreement that kept the normals from trespassing in their magical valley, and it was supposed to keep the normals safe from being fodder for spells. Apparently that no longer applied. Mina wondered what else was all just a fancy facade. And that is the end of Chapter 12, book lovers. I hope you're still enjoying Heart of the Storm. Again, if you have book suggestions, cat stories, just want to say hi, feel free to reach out, send me a message on Instagram or Facebook, books.cats.pod, or send me a message, books.cats.pod@gmail.com. I hope you have a fantastic week. Make sure on Sunday you check out the newest episode of Storytime with M, where I am sharing my book Feelers, a chapter or two a week. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep reading.